Recording in progress.
Good. Welcome everyone to the Town of Pownal Special Select Board Meeting, January 2026 at 5 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can we have the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Board member roll call. Carl Strohmeyer.
Katie Alexander.
Mike Gardner. I'd like to introduce our special guest tonight. And I apologize, I'm not exactly positive who's in, and I can't really see the board, but we have Senator Seth Baumgart, Representative Jonathan Cooper, Representative Mary Morrissey, Representative Michael Negro, Senator Robert Plunkett. So I would like to open this meeting tonight, thanking each and every one of our invitees who are here tonight. I think this is probably, I don't know if it's ever happened in Pownal before, but whatever, it's, and I appreciate your time. I think there's some things that our residents have some concerns about, and we hear them here on the board. And if we don't figure out how to share them with our senators and our representatives, then we're failing our constituents here in town. And I think we're trying not to do that, trying really hard. So that being said, if you want to introduce yourselves, or do you want to, when we come to each topic, you can introduce when we speak. That's up to you guys. I mean, so I'd like to open the discussion. These are some important issues that we feel are facing our residents in town, as they are people in the entire state, right? It's not unique to Pownal. Okay, let me be first and foremost. It's definitely not unique here. These are things that are statewide, right? So one of the things that we hear here on the board is the property taxes and the increase in the state increase every year at the 11% or the 12% or whatever it is. But over the last 5 years, I think it's been like a 41% increase from the state over a 5-year period. So that concerns us as select board members, because we're putting together budgets that we have to really work hard to make it affordable for our residents to stay in town. You know, and it keeps us on our toes, that's for sure. Making our own town budgets where we have the control, we really have to be frugal. And that's a question that comes up, and I would love to have some input from our people upstate that represent us down in this area. So, go ahead, Jean.
Yeah. I guess thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. I just want to echo what Mike was saying. I moved here just about 3 years ago. And over the past almost 3 years, I've sort of helped probably 12, 13 people relocate, find homes in Vermont. I've been a huge cheerleader for this state. I love this state. There's a lot of reasons why I moved here. And honestly, some folks, everyone who moved sort of did their own research, right? But there's been some sticker shock, just like over the past 3 years with the increases they've experienced. And I know that as a state, we're trying really hard to bring new people into the state. And I'm finding that it's becoming almost impossible for folks unless they're working from home, independently wealthy, or in some other category where they can actually survive here. It's really hard. And then the other thing that we are hearing from some of our residents, people that have been here for generations, generations and generations, their families have been, just how difficult it is becoming to simply remain in a place that's been their home and their family's home, in some instances for hundreds of years. And so we take that really seriously and thought that a productive, good discussion, and given our residents and neighbors an opportunity to speak with you guys would be super helpful. So thanks.
Carl, everybody came here to listen to these gentlemen, not me, so we'll let these guys get out of telling us.
I do want to say one thing. I see a hand up out in the audience. This is the format that I'd like to use tonight. And it's new for me. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe it's the wrong format, but this is what we're gonna do tonight. I'm going to bring up the topic in the property taxes and the tax increase is the first one that I'd like to speak about tonight. So I'm gonna give each person an opportunity, each one of our invitees to speak about what they feel is going on and how you see it. And then I will open it up to public discussion on each topic. There's three things that I'd really like to touch on tonight. And we can open it up to more. And you guys have something else, that's fine with me and Mary. That's kind of how I'd like to do it. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, and if it is, we'll figure it out. So I'm gonna go in order how they are on my paper, on my agenda. So that's gonna be Senator Baumgart's first, sorry. Hold on. You're muted, sir.
Was he muted on our end?
No.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Yeah, I think we all got muted.
Oh.
I had to unmute. So, yeah, thanks for having us. And the property tax issue has been dogging us for quite a while. We have a system for funding education that I think virtually everybody agrees is broken. Completely understandable by anybody, but almost anybody. And it's a system where, as I say about it, the current system we have is almost ingenious in that nobody is responsible. And when you have a system when nobody is responsible, it tends not to work out well. And what I mean by that is the current system, what really happens, the reason property taxes are going up is because voters all over Vermont vote their budgets, their school budgets, and even though a given district may be very conservative and penny wise, districts in other parts of the state may not be and might be spending a lot more money. And in the end, the simplest way to put it is, it all goes into one big pot. One big number gets created, and the role of the legislature really is just to set the multiplier. And that has produced perverse effects all over the place, and we're seeing it. And it was exacerbated by the stresses on the system from COVID. And so the answer to you is, we have brought down the rate, even though the voters have voted 41% in the last 5 years. We have actually brought down the rate, like there was almost no increase last year because we brought the rate down by finding money that we could dump into the funnel to reduce the amount that people had to pay under property taxes. That's not going to continue, because every year we do that, it actually makes it worse the next year. So we have to, the only way to really put this is we need to blow up the existing system and build a new system. And that's what we're trying to do with Act 73, which has all kinds of issues. There's things that I like about it, things I don't like about it, things I agree with, don't agree with. But the only answer is to build a new system, because the current system is fundamentally flawed and fundamentally broken. And so that's what we're trying to do. We have to do something that puts somebody in charge under Act 73. If we do go to the foundation formula, in the end, the legislature will be responsible for setting the rate of increase. And at least somebody will be responsible. And you'll actually have somebody to direct your anger at, or maybe hopefully even your praise, but your anger at, right now, there's almost nobody to direct it to because nobody is responsible for the current system within the current system. And that's bizarre. It's really, the impacts of that are becoming very acute. And we saw, especially in 24 with the rate increase that would have been 20% if we hadn't been able to buy it down to 13. We have anyway, I don't want to dominate the whole thing, but we've got a totally broken system. We need to fix it.
Thank you.
Representative Cooper?
Sure, I think, so yes, thank you. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be able to be here in the room. And I think, as Senator Bongartz mentioned, our education funding is a weird situation. And one that I think we go back about 30 years with, landmark Supreme Court decision, Brigham really deciding that the local way to do this for each town, for just funding its own schools, was not constitutionally, was not meeting the constitutional standard in the state of Vermont for providing equal access to education. It comes from a noble place in a decision by the state Supreme Courts. And sadly, when we look back at the disparity between the schools that were funding the most, or the districts that were funding the most, and the difference between that and the five that were funding the least back in 1997, it's just about the same disparity as we have today. So what we have is a system that passes legal muster, but doesn't actually deliver what common sense would say would mean equitable access to education.
Oh, I'm new to this.
No, we're gonna let them talk.
Okay.
Okay,
Come back to the problem.
that's fine. When we're done with the,
Let me know, right?
I will.
And so that is, and so that's part of the challenge that we're at now. Something that was attempting to make the level of playing fields didn't really get there in terms of dollars and cents. But I'd like to add a little bit more to that, why we're seeing some of the challenges we're in at this point budgetarily. I was looking through some of the Department of Taxes revenues just in run up to this meeting, and the amount of money that's being claimed in personal exemptions is going up. The amount of money that's going into our pension liabilities is going up. All the sorts of signs of a state with an aging population. And so I think, as Jeannie, as you mentioned, trying to bring people to the state, as the state is trying to bring people to the state, are we getting the profile of people that are bringing us, that are helping to resolve our demographic sort of pyramid, where we're getting a little grayer at the top and fewer kids in schools sort of at the bottom. And so it is a really sticky wicket, one that we see, I think, all across rural America, certainly in northern New England. As you said, Mike, these are challenges that are felt across across Vermont. And just for those that haven't had a chance to meet, the Bennington 1 district is almost all of Pownal. If you're west of Route 7, if you're south of Barber Pond Road, and the towns of Reedsboro, Searsburg, Sanford, and Woodford. And it's forcing communities into these very difficult decisions. The Reedsboro School District will be voting in March whether to shut down the Reedsboro General School. That building was built for 140 kids, and it's got about 40 in it. And it feels like an amusement park on a rainy day. We've been down there a couple times. The Vermont Symphony Orchestra was just down there for like a sort of mini performance for the students. A really a wonderful little community center. And so there's these, and the weird thing is, if that school stops operating, their education tax still goes up by 19 cents over this current fiscal year. So I wish there were better answers, but at this point, I'm trying to list what I think are some of the reasons that we see the things that we see, and hopefully a crisis won't go to waste, and that we'll figure out what we need to figure out so that there's fewer futures like the regional school might be facing right now, and more for the schools that should be filled with children and with school plays that are attended by the families that send those children there.
Thank you, John. Is Representative Morrissey in? Okay, then we'll go to Representative, Negro, and if I am mispronouncing your name, I apologize totally.
You just popped out, you might wanna.
Yep. So Representative Negro, I'm sorry, we're talking about, property taxes and the property tax increase, from the state, the projected 12%, I think it was this year, and the 5% or the, 41% over the last 5 years. We're just trying to get a feel of, Senator, or, Mr. Bongartz and Mr. Cooper have both spoke on that, so, you're the next guy in line on my agenda, so that's how we're doing it.
Sure. First of all, I apologize for being late and
Fine.
having trouble finding a space that is quiet enough to do this. I thought I was going to be home by now. Sorry, just a moment.
That's all right.
Okay.
Let me just briefly say, I share your concern. Last year, from my position on the Appropriations Committee, I was one of the strong voices in support of spending down, using 70 million to spend down our property taxes last year. I thought that was really, really important. We just finished our budget adjustment in the House. We just voted on it the first time today. And in that, the governor had put aside over 100 million from various sources to use for, his intent is to use for property tax mitigation. I think we aren't ready necessarily to say if all of that's available, because there are a lot of cost pressures on the state right now. But I think that certainly from my perspective, property tax is a top priority. It's a top priority from so many voters I speak to. So it's, again, aside from the fact that I have a lot of concerns about cost pressures, certainly support the construct that we have unacceptable levels of property tax increase, and I think a lot of legislators share that feeling.
Thank you. Senator Plunkett.
Hi, thank you. And if you don't recognize me because of the beard, it's new. I'm Senator Rob Plunkett. I'm glad that you invited us all. I apologize that we're not able to be down there, but it is a fairly busy season. And one of the tough parts of answering the question later down in the line is that there's not much more to say other than what has already been said. So I echo pretty much everything that we just heard from Senator Bongartz and our representatives. But I suppose I want to put a little more of a finer point on when we're talking about property tax, because we do have, essentially two property taxes. Municipal tax, that is the municipality, and our communities have generally been frugal on that. So when you have your bill, you can look at that and you can say, yes, we did our job. It's really the education property tax that is something that has been far more out of control than we would want. And we're talking about the short-term solutions and the long-term solutions. And I agree with Representative Nigro that the choice to buy down that tax last year was the right one. The offset to that, though, is we're talking about the projected increase of 12% to the property tax. Well, that would have been probably half at 6% if we hadn't done the buy down. But I do support doing that again this year, in part because we know that, budgets everywhere, whether it's the state budget, local budgets, our household budgets, they're all strained by all of these costs that have gone up far more than we had expected in the last 5 years. In fact, I'd heard today about one cost of running camps that are state forests in the last 10 years, that's gone up more than 50%. So there's a considerable amount of inflation that's happened. And the longer term in terms of property taxes is exactly what Senator Bongartz has discussed. And that is going to be a detailed nuance, and it's going to take a long time. And I'm not sure if this session will be able to say, yes, we have a solution that you will see next year, 3 years, 5 years from now, but that is what we've been working on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is Representative Morris in by any chance? Okay. So, board members, do we have any questions for any one of our senators or representatives that are here with us tonight?
I just want us to.
Okay.
Well, I came in late. Brian Harris, Select Board Member, Town of Pownal. I apologize for being late, family commitments. Perhaps it was already addressed. Is it being considered, perhaps, you say this is going to take a long time to address, budget cuts. It's time to Vermont to get its financial house in order. You talk about households facing increased costs. In households, we have to stay within our budgets. We can't just run an endless deficit and make somebody else pay for it. 12% tax increase year over year is not sustainable. You talk about wanting to draw families in, you want more kids in the state. This endless round of tax increase after tax increase is not how you go about doing it. It's time that you look at your budgets and you got to make hard decisions. What are the necessities and what are the nice to haves? It's time to start cutting some of the nice to haves and worry about the needs.
Well, I think Senator Bongartz, Brian, touched on that before he got here. He basically told us that it's a broken system. That
It is a very broken
that
system.
needs to be fixed. And so you missed out part of it. So I think that was addressed. And I do want to apologize when I said property taxes. I did thank you, Senator Plunkett, about bringing that up. It is education property taxes that we're more concerned about than just general property taxes. And I should have pointed that out initially. You guys picked up on it. I just want everybody else in the audience to know that that's what we were, kind of getting at. I had one question, and it doesn't matter kind of who answers or who doesn't. One of the things that you brought up, Senator Bongartz, was the system is broken, and I don't think anybody disagrees. It sounds like everybody, even up in Montpelier, agrees that the system is broken, right? Are there plans? Are there plans to for a new system? Is there anything? And I totally understand what you're telling me, Senator Plunkett, and I get that it's not an easy fix, and it's not going to happen this session or maybe even next. Are we working on a new system? And that's just
Yes,
okay.
we are. Let me add a couple things since the discussion started. One is that there's a bill introduced by the President Pro Tem of the Senate, Senator Baruth, to cap the district spending for the next 2 years for the years that would be FY 28 and 29. And I think he put it in at 3%. So it's a blunt instrument. It's kind of a hammer to get down, to reduce the rate of increase in school district spending that then results in that whole system that I discussed earlier, which is, and for your select board member who came in late, just to go back to it quickly, the legislature actually doesn't set the property, school property taxes are set by the voters of Vermont every year when they vote their budgets in March. And all that number goes into one big pot, and fundamentally all the legislature does is set the multiplier to raise the money that voters have voted all over Vermont. The reason the system is broken within that system I just described is that in a way, you can be very frugal in your district, as I suspect you are, and I know that a lot of us are in our districts, but other districts are not as frugal and you end up paying for that. And that's a system where, as I said earlier, it's almost ingenious in that actually nobody is in control, nobody's responsible, because all the legislature actually does, and is required to do by law, is set the multiplier for all the money voted by voters all over Vermont. But it's a system where voters can do that with some level of impunity because the costs get visited on other districts. And so that's at core the fundamental problem with the current system. It's not, there is no fixing it. There is no fixing the existing system. There is only to blow it up and start over. So in the short run, Senator Baruth has a bill in that I have vocally supported, even though it's a blunt instrument, to hold down the rate of increase to 3% for district spending for the next 2 years. And that will cause some pain. That'll be really hard for districts to do. But we also have to keep reminding ourselves that voters can't pay their property taxes. We've got a real problem, and it's the one that was articulated by all the board members at the beginning of this, that people are having a hard time. And part of it is their property taxes as a result of the school spending. And we need to get a handle on it. And I say that as somebody who's very supportive of education, by the way, just not to get misunderstood about this. And I'm actually the chair of the Senate Education Committee, and I care deeply about educating kids and doing what we need to do for them. But we also have to balance that within the parameters of what people in the state of Vermont can actually afford to pay. So the new system under consideration, actually, in a way, it's partially almost law. It's got a few contingencies, but it's called the foundation formula. And what it really does fundamentally is it says that everybody across the state of Vermont pays the same per 100 value of property, and districts get the money back on a per weighted pupil basis. So everybody pays the same, everybody gets the same amount back, but it has a fixed multiplier that limits the rate of increase to, I'll use the term CPI, although it's actually different indices, but it's effectively the CPI, so that there will be a control of the rate of increase statewide at a level that's been much lower than what we've been experiencing the last several years. So yes, there is a fix being contemplated. There's the short-term fix and there's the longer-term fix. Both of them are under very active consideration, and they are the second one especially is really complicated. It's got all kinds of considerations that have to get worked out. But those are the two things: the immediate from Senator Baruth, and the longer term that we're working on.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, John. There's one other element of where the money ends up going, or how we end up spending the money we spend, is organizations coming to the legislature to say, here's our ask of the legislature for the budget, $400,000 for this program, $500,000 to do that program. And something that Mike's committee appropriations did, and I think it would be great to get a little more detail if you have a second, just to tee it up a bit, was they sent out to us a list to everyone, all the committee members, all the House, I think maybe it's also over in the Senate, really elevating the level of detail that they want us to demand from those who come before the committee. Like, here's where your revenues are. Here's what you're going to try to do this year. Why do you think this will work? What is this? How does this relate to your mission? The idea being that I think everybody got a little spend happy with the COVID dollars, and we were taking flyers on programs. Let's see if this works. That's something that you can do in a time of resources, you might say, was to see, well, can we go a little farther? And what if we double this budget, can we get more than double the bang for the buck? And there's an optimism that sort of floods the zone in those circumstances. And I think it was really helpful with appropriations to say, the winds aren't blowing that way this year. So let's, one, make sure that everybody is coming before committees with the same sort of format for what they want. And two, that all the legislators are prepared to feel empowered to ask questions that are a little tougher, because there are the things, Brian, that are nice to have. but I don't know if we're in a nice to have kind of budgetary moments. And I don't know if Mike, if there's more to add to that, that seemed like a new twist this year, and I thought it was a really good one.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And, you know, aside from property
Hello?
taxes, there's,
Hello,
oh, hi, Mary.
Mary,
I'm
Hello,
just
Mary.
wanted, we just got off the house floor, I'm sorry.
So anyways, I was simply saying that aside from our property taxes, you know, there are a lot of decisions that have been made in Vermont in previous years in the past that affect, you know, our budget constraints and the money we have to invest in things like education as a state, you know, things, you know, like our state pensions, which we had allowed to get to such a underfunded point that several years ago we had to start pouring money into it, and things like that really suck energy out of other parts of our budget. And, you know, I think to some degree what Jonathan's referring to is, you know, we're very good at each year saying what needs to be done, how can we handle it? And in doing that, we'll appropriately oftentimes add funding someplace, add budget, add a program, add an agency. What we're not good at is ever going back and saying, is that one working? Do we still need to be doing it? Do we have 3 different agencies now that are all touching the same problem? Maybe we only need one. So we are trying to, and I think, you know, appropriations, both House and Senate, I think, are looking at this, and our agencies and departments are looking at it as well. You know, let's not just assume because we've been funding something that it's working. Let's actually decide what works, keep that, and the things that don't work or duplications, let's reduce those.
Perfect, thank you. Is Marion still?
Yes, I'm here, I'm sorry,
Mary,
I'm just,
thank you for coming in, Mary. So we're talking about the property tax increase, and specifically the education portion of property taxes. And we were, you know, questioning and trying to find out what's going on, and Senator Bongart's, you know, had explained it's a failed system. And then, you know, some of the other things that came up were what Mr. Nigro just explained, and I'm sure you heard him about, you know, duplication and some other things. So if you wanted to speak on that, Mary, that'd be great. And I know you're kind of put on the spot here a little bit because you're you know, and I know you were in session, and you know, thank you for taking the time to come in afterwards. I know you all will.
yeah, happy to come in, and I hope you can all hear me. My allergies, I'm losing my voice, so forgive me for that. If you can't hear me, just tell me, I'll try to speak up. I came in on Mike's comments, and I have been saying that literally for years. I was on appropriations. I think it was about 18 years ago. And even at that time, I was saying, why are we not slowing this down and really looking at what we've piled on to some of these agencies? Are they, you know, accomplishing what they were originally intending to do? You know, we need to look at that very carefully and thoughtfully going forward. And even like Mike said, we sometimes can have numerous different groups or nonprofits kind of doing the same thing, but who's really delivering and looking to bring the best, and how do you consolidate and be more funding wise, and more what's the word I want to say, the sustainable funding for a resource that will actually help our folks, and not just continue to take money and not really accomplish what the mission was. As far as education, my first year, which was 30 years ago, was the year of Act 60, and it had numerous challenges then. I remember them sending us home on town meeting week to explain this bill that I don't even think the legal people in the State House and Ledge Council could explain it. It was so complicated. And dealing with the property tax, it was kind of like this kind of minutia of everyone not really knowing how the funding was going to go. And so it has gone, it's just not sustainable, and it has not been from day one. I voted against it the first year I was there, not because I wanted to, but I did run some of our own figures from Bennington, and often Mike can probably tell you better how they do it now, but I know years ago they would often use 2 and 3 year old figures to calculate what a formula was, you know, for when they were proposing a bill, and especially a bill of significant price tag. And so I did run Bennington's own figures the year of Act 60, and it was not even coming close. I said, I can't vote for this because I don't know what it's going to do. You know, the premise was, you know, like it was going to make our schools better and everyone was going to have equal education and this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, as we've all seen over the years, it's had numerous challenges and difficulties, and not probably really the most equal education that, you know, we were supposed to be providing for our students across the state. So it has been a challenge. I'm not sure if I have solutions at this point. I've been trying to watch very carefully what's coming out of education. And, you know, the conversations have been a bit difficult because I feel a little bit like we're kind of in the same place we've been. This is hard. All of these pieces of legislation, especially when you're talking about an education fund that's at about $2.5 billion budget, we've got to be very thoughtful and careful of how we address this issue to provide tax relief for our taxpayers, but also providing an excellent education for our students, while at the same time providing the resources that our teachers need. Because you can be looking to cut in one spot, but that may bulge out another area that you're going to be spending more, such as when we did Act 46, and they thought, oh, if we just consolidate all these schools across the state, that'll save all this money. Well, actually, it did the reverse of what it was supposed to, and it actually made it more difficult because we still have communities across the state. Some are not, you know, some parts of communities are not talking to the other part because their school was closed and the others weren't. So there's been this feeling of, you know, not a fairness in the discussion either. So as I said, we've got to be extremely thoughtful and careful for what we do. And again, folks have to remember, when you close a school, you're usually merging other schools together. So does that mean our children will be on buses and you have to pay for transportation? You have to look at refitting schools to meet the needs of how many students you now have in one school, whether that's 2 or 3 combined or merged together. We've also have not maintained the school maintenance over the years or providing. So there's many of our schools now that need some significant improvements to them because the maintenance has been deferred. And so, you know, we've got also, you know, like I said, schools struggling with their infrastructure and the needs of improvement. So there's unfortunately, many issues within this, but we've got to get to a point where we can look at this and take pieces of it. And I'm not sure, you know, where we're at with getting there. I'm not seeing And we're all in different committees, so it's hard to every day have a feeling of what the education committees are, but they've got a tough task. Come out with trying to appease 150 House members and 30 Senate members, but also the taxpayers of the state of Vermont and the citizens to, have a piece of legislation that's going to hopefully work for everyone. But there, unfortunately, as in any discussion, there's often, winners and losers. But I think if we take the time, and I'm not saying we've got to be careful about it, and I'm not saying you slow it down to kick the can down the road, but you just can't make decisions without really knowing what the results or the impact will be in another area, because I don't want to resolve one issue and have 3 more issues of, pop out somewhere else. So like I said, we've got to look at all parts of this discussion, and I'm sorry I rattled on for so long.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you again so much for joining us. And I'm seeing hands. And I think we need.
I'm gonna stay very consistent with how I've run these similar things in the past. The people who are in the room, present here with us are gonna have the first opportunity to ask questions or speak, and then we'll go to the people who are on Zoom. So do I have anybody in here that has a question? And so here's what we need to do, because so that we're all crystal clear and everybody can hear what's going on. When somebody has something to say, I'm gonna have you come to the table, state your name, and then feel free to ask however questions. If you usually have a 3-minute time limit, I'm not gonna stick to that tonight, because I think this is kind of a off kilter type of thing, so.
Thank you so much for everyone for being here. I know that many people.
Just state your name, please.
Sandy Foster, sorry.
Thank you. No, it's all right.
I know that many people think of education costs of being your public school funding, and we didn't talk about independent funding at all. I know that you might also believe that many of the education costs are from nice things that the school may or may not want to have, but the number one driving cost for the education increase are healthcare. The average family last year spent $17,000 on healthcare in our public schools, not the independent schools who are not mandated to get that healthcare system, which is state funded. This year, it'll be $41,000 for a family. $41,000 is something that the schools have no control over. It's not a nice thing. It's things that are mandated and that people need. So when I hear about the costs, that actually just makes me cranky, because that is out of our control. When we talk about giving funding for independent schools, I'm on board. But I would love those independent schools to follow the same rules that our public schools are faced with. Having licensed teachers. Don't have to have that if you're an independent school. You don't have to have that $41,000 family plan. You can go out and purchase a plan on your own market. You are not mandated to follow the state licensing, managing compliance, professional development, and oversight. And if you're in an independent school and a student isn't a good fit, then that student may not have to stay. Whereas if you're in a public school, all students are obligated and have a place to be. So we haven't talked about those costs, and those are factors. They're real factors, that healthcare being the biggest driver of our educational spending. And this school board for the elementary school had just about a flat rate. It was a 1% increase over the budget from last year. But because of other factors that they had no control over, the citizens of Pownal will see probably a 12% increase. And that is a very difficult piece to manage. So 3 minutes, Mike?
No, you can keep going. I'm not gonna stick to the 3-minute thing tonight. I think these are, to me, the three subjects that I would like to speak about tonight are very important to me for the residents of Pownal. So I'm not gonna stay with the 3-minute thing tonight. I want to let things go. So if you have some other stuff, Cindy, please, keep going.
I feel that those are the biggest pieces that are concerning.
So I do want to be pretty clear on one thing from my own standpoint. And this isn't really so much for, I guess it is for our invited representatives and senators. I am sort of directly involved in the school system, outside of the select board. I don't feel that our school boards, and I want to be clear on this, I don't feel that our local school boards have done a bad job. That's not the reason for this topic from my standpoint, okay? My reason for the topic is everyone here has explained exactly what it is. School boards across the state, and I was a school board member in Pownal for like 8 years, but it was also 20-something years ago. So I know what the school boards are up against, years ago. The funding, right? It's every school board in the state puts out a budget to their towns and cities, and they vote yes or no. And then that goes into the pot, like Senator Baumgart said, and then it gets dispersed. There's a multiplier, XYZ, whatever it is. And that's, I think, and you touched on that. It's the flawed system. I think Ms. Foster just touched on some other things that are another flaw in the system, right? The independent schools don't need to follow the same rules and regulations and guidelines as the public schools do. Right. And I think we've touched on a lot of those things tonight. Everybody, I think we've got some information out there that just needed to be out there in the public.
And to clarify, I'm not trying to say that independent schools are bad. I am not at all. I'm just saying that they are not obligated to follow by the same standards that the public schools are.
Right.
Yeah, that's
I just think it's information that the general public doesn't realize that information, this is what happens.
We are obligated in the public schools to provide universal access to all students, and independent schools are not. And that's a big driver as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else in the room?
Can we respond? Do you want us to respond to some of those?
Yeah, that's fine. Sure. So I apologize.
A couple of things, to the extent that we talked about healthcare, a couple of things going on that are worth you knowing about. One is that the legislature last year took some steps that are going to reduce the rate of increase in healthcare costs. Reference-based pricing was one of them. The other is the work of the healthcare board, and as it relates to work we've done with regard to prescription drug prices and other things that are actually will drive down the cost of the rate of increase by some degree. The other thing is that there's a bill that got introduced into the House. One of the problems going on that school districts are facing with the cost of healthcare is that when we switch to the statewide system with a statewide contract and a statewide negotiation for healthcare, the way it was drafted, the bill does the current construct does two things. When you get to the point that the two sides are deadlocked and there's an arbitrator is brought in, the criteria tend to push the arbitrator to always side for the more expensive healthcare plan. And the other thing is that it's last best offer. The two sides get as close as they can, then the arbitrator can only pick one or the other. And so for the last several years, the last several negotiations, it has always gone toward the more expensive plan, which of course the teachers want. I'm not begrudging that. It's just the way it is. And so the bill that was introduced by Representative Pownal from Dorset at the behest of the Superintendent's Association does two things. It seeks to change the criteria that the arbitrator is able to consider, and it does away with last best offer and let the arbitrator sort of put something together from between the two. And that has the potential to make a real difference for that portion of the rate of increase that school boards are facing. The other, the independent school discussion is a long, complicated discussion. But I think a few things to note. One is that the total expenditure on independent schools is less than 3% of the total expenditures of that $2.1 billion that we spend with tax dollars. So it's a tiny percentage. It's about $64 million out of that. And the schools are actually subject to very rigorous control by the State Board of Education. It's just that the rules they operate under are tailored differently to fit the independent school construct, which is different than the way that public schools operate, but actually very rigorous. And they have the same requirements for special ed. In fact, some of them run very good special ed programs, and they take every kid from their district. So there's a lot of I don't know if I want to use the term misinformation, but it's much more complicated than the sound bites about independent schools. In fact, and by the way, last year under the construct that was passed, the portion of Act 73 that was passed, cut the number of independent schools eligible for tuition from about something like 38 down to 18. And so it's those that are fundamental to the delivery system. And so we're in a very different landscape now. And we're talking about schools that, frankly, just do, I think in every respect, a remarkable job for their communities. So it's just not, it's a little more complicated than the sound bites.
Okay.
Do I have anybody else that wants to respond to Ms. Foster? Any of my other representatives or senators? Okay, thank you for your response.
My name's James Morgan, resident of North Pownal. I've lived in the same house for 34 years. 12% increase on school tax? Is that what you're saying? Pretty much? Okay, I mean, just roughly?
It's a number that's been thrown.
Okay. Explain to me why.
Please don't raise your
Oh,
voice.
I'm sorry. Please explain to me why.
The 12% at this point is not a real number. It's the number that the administration thinks might be the number if everybody voted their budgets as they're proposed. The reason is that that's what voters are voting all over Vermont. It's not, frankly, anything the legislature is doing. Voters vote that all over Vermont. And the problem with the system that we've been talking about tonight is that what you do locally, even if you're very conservative, you get those voted numbers from others visited on you. And so the answer is the one we've been giving. The system is fundamentally broken. It needs to be replaced.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
100%. But I mean, the educational system, the kids are coming out of Bennington High School, Southern Vermont Supervisor Union. Half of them can't read, write, abstract, multiply, divide, or have any common sense. But they get passed, here's your diploma, they're sent out into the public, and now they're our problem. Okay? And another problem is you're raising taxes all over the place, but you're chasing all the industry out. The factories are closing faster than you can open them up around here. And you expect people to pay more and more and more? How? How can that be right to anybody?
Jim, I think we're getting off task a little bit. And I'm not trying to cut you off, but we're trying to stay on.
Well, that still comes down to the school thing though.
We're trying to stay on topic, right? We're trying to stay on the school, the education tax increase. And I'm not disagreeing with you on the industry and all that stuff, but we're kind of on the same road, but we took a little bit of a detour.
You're raising the school taxes, Mike, but the problem is there's no employment around here anymore. How are people gonna pay this extra 12%?
So you're connecting this with employment tax?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter how you look at it, it still comes down to the bottom dollar. Where's the money coming from?
No.
The taxpayer's pocket, Mike,
No,
okay? Now, does everybody agree with me? We pay for everything. Taxpayers pay for everything, okay? And that's the bottom line, okay? But 12%, who can afford it? Welcome to Pownal, Vermont, people. There is nothing here. There's
Well,
no
again,
job.
well, Jim,
Again, what-
and there again, I think we're getting kind of,
That's fine, Mike, if you got money to live here.
so hear me out for a minute, right?
Okay, I'm listening.
Hear me out for a minute. We're not gonna solve any of these problems sitting here tonight by anybody that's in this.
Nobody says nothing, though.
But that's why we're here. This is exactly why I wanted to have this session so we can have conversations so that our senators and our representatives who are living in the same community that we are. These people, every one of them lives within 30 miles of where we're sitting right now.
Okay,
Okay, everyone here. This isn't from Burlington, it isn't from Montpelier, it's from Bennington County, or, they're right here with us. So they understand what we're talking about. Okay, so I think every single one of them will agree with you that industry or lack of industry or whatever. But I do want to get to some other topics. I just don't want to get off tangent
all right, I agree with you.
on why and what's going on, I think we need to stay.
could I make a remark?
Absolutely, Mary, sure, please.
I've seen it over the years. A lot of what has driven, I think, the cost of education up so high is many unfunded mandates. And naturally, then everyone thinks we can just punt kick it to the taxpayer. Well, the taxpayers, as we know, are struggling and can't do this. And that's why we have to be, very cautious with what's being passed and what we can afford. And as far as the with industry and all of that, that all plays into it. We have to have vibrant communities that are raising revenues that take some of that off the back of our citizens, our tax-paying citizens. And we don't seem to have, Vermont, unfortunately, for a number of years, has been considered not a friendly business climate to many industries that would like to be here or not. Yes, we all love having a clean state, whatever. I get all of that. But sometimes we're over-regulating and overtaxing the very industries or businesses we would like to come into our state. We've got to do all of this better, and we can't just kind of keep kicking the can down the road.
Does that help you a little bit, Jim?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
So I'll just add that, so James, I live on North Pownal Road, so you're with the district that I represent. And I hope before we leave, I can just hand you my contact info so we can talk more about.
I've already had a chat.
We've had a chat, and there's another chance to have it this Saturday at the Hilltop Farm Store. I'll be there from 3 to 4:30. So I'd like to talk more about it, how it dovetails with the work that I'm trying to do. And you put your finger on something, a pulse that I try to take every day. So, I hope we can keep it going.
But as a regular citizen, you can only swallow the pill for so long. The pill gets bigger every year.
And I think that's exactly what I'm hearing every single person that's joined us tonight. I've heard every one of them say the same exact thing and agree with us. And I think, like I said, Jim, we're not gonna reinvent the wheel tonight. My goal is for our representatives and senators that represent us in our immediate area, hear us. They hear you. They hear Ms. Foster. They hear when I get to Mr. Kosis, who's had his hand up for a while, and other people in the room. They're hearing us, and that's our goal. Okay, we're not going to fix anything tonight.
You're hearing us. People have been saying the thing for years and years and years and years.
Nobody's done this.
Nobody's first,
This is the first time that anybody's had this, so.
well, maybe the first time here, but the problem's still been this going on forever.
But if
Well,
no,
I understand how the system works, and I appreciate Representative Baumgarten to explain it. So what I'm hearing is municipalities need to start vetoing budgets. And if enough municipalities veto their budgets, that's kind of what needs to happen.
There's so many things I've seen as a citizen of the state of Vermont
I
that
don't want
have
to
broke
debate,
my heart.
right? I don't want to debate.
I know, I'm trying not to be, but the problem is this is the first time I've ever been to a town meeting of any kind in my life. Okay?
I understand.
A couple of years ago, I actually registered to vote first time in my life. Okay? Because I want to change. Okay? This country's dying slowly and nobody cares. You know? And that's the biggest problem.
So I have,
Well, that's why more citizens need to get involved and pay attention to what's going on.
we have a couple more people in the room. Jim, I got you, Jim. I know you're out there, so I'm sorry.
Good evening. My name is Michael Fernandez. I'm actually a resident of Arlington, not Pownal, but many of you know me from my work with the Bennington County Conservation District. Last year, we directed something around $200,000 into small businesses and working land stewardship enterprises around Pownal. That's just within the town of Pownal. Due in part to, we are one of those groups that comes to the legislature every year trying to get base funding. But I am going to take my conservation district hat off for the evening and speak as what seems to be a dying breed in the state and also in the room. Someone below the age of 35 who moved to this state to start a small business, which I do. My 7 to 7 is public service, working for the county, and then from about 5 in the morning to 7, and from 7 until I can't walk anymore, I'm a farmer. And I want to, as a younger person, I want to push back on a few things that I've heard in this room. One, austerity. I'm hearing a lot of austerity talk here. In no way, and in my day job, I see this all the time. We live in implementation world at the conservation district. So the laws that you all pass, we're usually the ones helping state agencies interpret those and actually implement them on the ground. And this is not the only property tax bomb that we have brewing in the state of Vermont. But there are a number of policy suggestions that I could bring up. Some, Senator Bongertz, I know you heard about today, that being public banking and allowing the state to establish its own financial institutions to make intelligent investments, which frankly is someone who's worked almost 5 years now in getting state funding out to residents. We do not invest in the right things in this state. We do not invest in growth. And it shows in the budgets that we get from Montpelier. And I see the comment on it being off topic, but I assure you it is. We cannot cut our way out of this property tax crisis. As this state gets grayer and as property continues to consolidate, property taxes are going to continue to increase. There just aren't enough people moving to the state. There's not enough revenue going into the state coffers because, like you said, sir, there aren't businesses being started. There isn't economic activity that is feeding into these state coffers. So I would really encourage, and again, saying this as a citizen, not in my day job, looking at some of these longer term strategic initiatives that the state could engage in, like public banking, that would allow for more of the state's revenue to stay in the state. Right now, every penny of the state's coffers is being lent out all over the world because it's held in private banks. Vermont had a public bank for a short period of time in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And currently, the only public bank left in the United States is the Bank of North Dakota. And they utilize that bank to alleviate a lot of the issues that we're raising in this room right now. So I want to just push back on the austerity talk. I understand the impulse, but as someone who spends 12 hours a day, sometimes 6 or 7 days a week, getting these programs on the ground. People need them. It's in many cases, the difference between farms or other enterprises failing or succeeding is these programs that people cut very cavalierly because it's not something that directly impacts them. So that's my 2 cents for now. There's lots of ways that we could make life more affordable in this state outside of the property tax issue that we see at the conservation district on a daily basis. I help hundreds of people every year navigate the labyrinth that is state programs, regulations, and permits. So if legislators would like to discuss that with local conservation districts, folks like Jim sitting over here, that we are in the trenches with this stuff every single day, and I've never once been asked by a legislator what I think could help impact the wider issues that are facing our community. So let's get some more young people in this state, start families, businesses, and make it an attractive place to live over the course of somebody's life. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks a lot for doing this, Town of Pownal.
Could you just say your name, sir? I'm sorry.
And thanks for attending, all of you legislators. My name's Jim Henderson. I work for the Bennington County Regional Commission, and I live in the town of Sandgate, population of about 375 people. And I want to kind of pick up a little bit of where Michael left off, and I think it's very related. It's about the significant demographic change that we are all experiencing and seeing. And it affects us economically with our property taxes. It affects us culturally, and it affects our municipal services, and specifically relating to schools. Our population is certainly getting older, and the younger population is getting smaller. And a healthy education system relies on a healthy younger demographic group. And that means younger people who are working and raising children and sending them to schools. Certainly, we have so many schools scattered around Vermont that were built generations ago for a much larger population than they have now. And because of the economies and global markets, some of those schools no longer have the populations because there's not the jobs in the towns like Reedsboro and to support the local population. So the population of the school kids are going down in some of these schools, yet the expenses are the same or rising. We talked about the healthcare costs. There's still the heating costs. There's still the janitorial costs, the teacher costs. So the population of the schools are going down. The costs are either staying the same or rising. They're all rising. We know that. So obviously there must be some consolidation. And I appreciate the efforts that have been made to consolidate some of our school districts into more centralized schools. But the demographic change goes well beyond that too. And I think it really started with back in 9/11, and it really increased significantly in COVID. And a lot of this has to do with the internet and people who can telecommute. So there's a lot more people moving here, but not bringing or raising a family here. And we're talking about a lot more second homeowners, and I'm gonna really harsh on short-term rentals. And this is something that I see in my small town, and I feel it. It's very obvious when you live in a small town, because you know when properties are being bought and sold. When somebody can come and pay cash for a property that somebody else would have gone, a local person in town, gone to the bank, try to get a mortgage, doesn't matter. because somebody's gonna move in and just buy it in cash. But these are people who are not contributing so much to the local economy. They're moving here because Vermont's a great place to live. It certainly is. I want to talk about the jobs. The fact is there are manufacturers in Bennington right now who do not have a full workforce. They have openings on all their shifts. And the main reason for this is because people cannot afford to live in the state and either walk or drive a short distance to work like they used to. The fact is that most people who work in Manchester, Vermont, they live 20 miles away and have to drive a good 20 miles to get to a job that pays just over minimum wage. And the same is true for the manufacturers on Shields Drive in Bennington. And this is significant. We're going to start feeling this, this effect of having fewer young people being able to afford to buy a house, raise a family here on so many levels. And I'm talking about the fact that all of our road crews are aging out. Most of our road foremen are 60 years old or older, and most of the road crews are in that same age bracket. The same could be said about your municipal boards. Look at the average age of a select board or a planning commission, a zoning. There are fewer young people getting engaged in municipal and local services, and a large part of it isn't because they're not interested, it's just because they can't live here and afford to live here. And this goes straight back to the fact that our school taxes, your property taxes, are increasing. It's because of the demographic change. Now, I think that's a problem, and it presents us with challenges, but it also presents us with some opportunities. And this may seem extreme to you, but I think it's about time that second home owners, people who can lay down a wad of cash to purchase a house, should be able to pay higher taxes on the fact that they can afford to live here in a second home. I live on a road where there is 9 houses on my road. 3 of those houses, that's a third of them, are short-term rentals. My neighbor can make more in a weekend than I pay for my mortgage. I think it's about time that we consider a significant tax on short-term rentals, whether it's done locally, or I would suggest a statewide tax on short-term rentals. Because this is what is driving our young people out of the state of Vermont. And you take, for example, a ski resort, say Stratton, where a few 10, 20 years ago, when the ski season was over, a lot of those condos and homes, they were empty because people aren't skiing. So some of them would rent out that house to the carpenters, the painters, the landscapers. Now they're renting them to people who come up here for a party on the weekend. And it is better for them or cheaper for them to rent a house and to have all their friends converge in that house than it is for them to go to the inn or the hotel or the motel. So I could go on and on about short-term rentals. But I think that is a significant potential cash cow that could go into supporting our education. And it should be considered as an opportunity. And perhaps if we deal with it right and we think of this through, it could have multiple effects of helping local people be able to afford to live here. It could dissuade some of these people who come here only to profit off of their investment and open up a little bit more of an avenue for younger people to come here, raise their families, and put them into our education system. So I won't go on any longer, but thank you very much for my opportunity to spiel about something that really bothers the heck out of me.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
We're gonna go to Jim Costas. He's had his hand up for a long time, and I apologize, Jim. It's just kind of the nature of the beast tonight.
Jim?
Hello, guys. Let's see, hour and 20 minutes. I appreciate the guys, or all the representatives and everyone coming to Pownal to discuss with Pownal residents. I'm a little disturbed with outside people kind of coming in and kind of taking over the meeting. But first of all, I really want to just stress how much I appreciate Seth, and his comments. Yes, the system is broken. We have to start thinking out of the box. There is a discussion about healthcare. Yes, there is a problem with the healthcare and education. I'd love to see our teachers paid a lot more. But at the same time, I think there are businesses out there that aren't able to afford to pay for the healthcare for their employees. So what happens is if someone is working for the school district, their families are all included in the cost. There's very little contribution that really needs to be made. And I think that maybe needs to be changed because of the healthcare costs going up so high. I would love to give our teachers a lot more money in salary and pay and everything like that. But I think it needs to change of how healthcare, just to put in there that I used to work for the school district and maybe I took advantage of the healthcare plan and everything like that. But now that I see that everything is increasing so much, I'm starting to turn my opinion differently. Secondly, I think there's a problem with the way that funding is coming into the schools. The people are trying to vote for educational costs, but we need to maybe split out what it costs to educate our students at the same time. And I really feel every student needs an education in all directions, but I think there needs to be a change in people voting or not voting, but the state supporting the necessary special education that has to happen in the state. I know that we don't vote for a supervisory union where the education costs are put in there. Those just kind of drop down into the school budgets without any knowledge of what really is in that number. So I think there just needs to be somewhere to open up this box and kind of think outside the box. I know a lot of the taxes that are increasing in Bennington at this time is also because revenues have decreased. The budget is increasing a very small amount, but at the same time, the tax rate is increasing. That is only because the revenues that are coming into the school district. And one of the main reasons was because the surplus, which was at $3 million, is now being decreased down to $1.5 million. So we, the taxpayers this year, are being required to make up that difference of that revenue going down. It is no fault of anything else. And then the last thing is that I think I like the idea of spending limits, because Massachusetts used to have Proposition 2.5, and it comes to the point of, yes, maybe we need to put a little more cap on our increases, because the majority of the people are able to afford what they can in this town and or in the state, but there are a lot of people that can't afford it. And unfortunately, the people that are voting for all the school budgets are overriding the people that can't afford it. Thank you very much. And I hope we can get some other topics on tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. Do we have any other hands up on the audience, Hannah? No? Okay, so I really wanted to touch on three things tonight, but timing is not gonna be on our side for that. So, I'm gonna choose one that's really kind of popped up, here in Pownal. Maybe, and I think it's probably statewide as well, but one thing that we have struggled, or haven't, I won't say struggled with. One thing that's popped up on us this year is funding, for some emergency services. And then I'm gonna lean on, Representative Cooper, to bring the third topic, which was kind of, one of the concerns of mine was, Route 346 and Route 7 not being a priority winter maintenance type of thing. So we'll discuss that kind of, and then I'm gonna lean on you to bring it back to the rest of our people out here, because I appreciate your time. So I'm trying to move this. I know you guys, some of you had a really long day, and I appreciate everything. One thing that bothers me, and I was in the fire service for a long time here in Pownal, fire chief for a long time. Emergency services funding, and when I say that, I don't mean just fire. I mean fire, rescue, and law enforcement. So I'll be clear on that. It's not just one. It's all of our emergency services. So I think every small town in Vermont struggles with this, but I'm gonna stay specifically here to Pownal. Our volunteers and our rescue squad is paid. And our law enforcement, we deal with the sheriff's department and Vermont State Police. So I'm gonna start with them because that's gonna be kind of probably a quick one, because I'm not gonna be able to talk on that a whole bunch. One of the struggles that I heard, I was at the Capitol for a day with the governor and the cabinet, back in, I don't, November, maybe December, December. And one of the things I heard there, and one of the things that I actually brought up was, funding for law enforcement and retention of, officers. It's things that they struggled with. And, I know the governor has talked about some things that he's working on. And I know that they heard what was said at that, so, we don't want, but our fire and rescue, one of the things that I think they struggle with, and Mary stole my thunder earlier, on the schools, was the unfunded mandates. And when I was fire chief, all the way up until, I don't know, 2011, 12, whatever it was, I don't remember exactly. But I was involved in the fire department for 30 years. Unfunded mandates are things that the fire and rescue struggle with, immensely. Mandates get put on them, and there's no funding to follow through on those mandates. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that. And then, we can talk about law enforcement too, but I mean, the unfunded mandates that our fire service and our rescue people have to deal with, it kind of falls on their shoulders, and then it falls on, the residents and taxpayers of the towns to make up that difference. And in order to run these operations, their fire departments or their rescue squads, they have to follow these mandates. So, I'm gonna go backwards this time because we're only gonna have two. So I'm gonna ask Senator Plunkett to speak first. If he wants to on this one, we'll just go the opposite way.
Sure, Mike, and I suppose in terms of fire and rescue, what the mandates are would make a big difference. Because in one sense, I know that there are a lot of federal regulations just in terms of getting paid for Medicare, but I might need to be educated a little bit more on what specifically those mandates are, and then we can go to the agencies and discuss them with them. If it's a state thing, is it something that can be waived? Is there something that can be moved on from. But I know a little more familiar with rescue than with fire. But I know that these are essentially municipalities that are paying for them, or they're self-funded in some way. And a lot of, with rescue at least, comes from having to respond to every call, and then many of those calls being something where the person is uninsured, or it's a self-pay and they never get reimbursement. And one of the discussions we've been having is that we're expecting that more and more folks will be uninsured. And so that rescue responding to whatever particular call, those calls more likely than not will be less likely to be paid or reimbursed by some sort of insurance, whether it be state or private insurance. That concerns me. And I know specifically with Pownal Rescue, I think they had a request of 300,000 and maybe 200 was approved. And making sure that there's funding for them and every rescue in the area is something that I'm concerned about. And we do have the federal funding from I believe it's called the Rural Transformation Grant, but that's not something that's going to be able to be tapped into for simple operating budgets. That's for innovative programs. So one of the discussions is regionalization of rescue, and I don't know if that would apply with fire as well. But in terms of those two areas, that's really what I know in terms of this. And I'm hoping to hear a little bit more about what those mandates are, and let us know, and we can have discussions about them up here.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Nigro?
Yeah, I do think there's a little bit of a difference between, I agree, and this touches a little bit on what Rob was saying, a little difference between fire and rescue, in that rescue is stuck between a traditional healthcare model. I used to work in healthcare where you bill insurance, and a municipal service like fire services. And I think that kind of in between place they've been stuck, where they can bill for some of their services and not for others, has been really, the source of a lot of their problems. Again, I agree with Senator Plunkett. Federal regulation is really the biggest factor, at least in that piece. And again, in terms of fire services, I'm also comfortable admitting when I don't know a real lot. I'm a big supporter of our fire department, think very highly of them. I would, I guess I'd have to agree that I don't know a lot about those unfunded mandates, but I would certainly want to listen to our fire department as others are proposed. And I think if there's nothing else, I guess that's one of the important things I wanted to say tonight, and I'll do it now, which is I appreciate this conversation. I'm going to make a point that even though I couldn't be there in person, I certainly want to come in person at some point. It makes a difference to see people face to face and introduce myself. And I think the key point I would make is any decisions that are affecting our fire departments or emergency services, we want to hear directly from those organizations, from the folks that are experiencing this. So, I guess as any of those concerns come up, you've got the names on this Zoom and this meeting, and with Jonathan right there, reach out to us. We want to know.
Thank you. Mary?
Yes. Well, I'm talking unfunded mandates, and if we're talking specifically about, like our emergency services, so often we'll say to our services, many who are volunteers, you need so many gazillion more hours of training, which again, yes, we love to have a good trained team out there, providing these services, but then we don't provide the money for them to go. And these like I said, in a lot of cases, these are volunteers that we have in our community stepping up to the plate. And, you know, we're saying you have to do more and more and more and jump higher, but then we don't provide the funding to do the actual, you know, further training. And usually most of the training on a weekend is up north somewhere. So that, you know, takes away from, you know, these volunteers' family. You know, a volunteer in our emergency services is 24/7, 365 days of the year. They don't have the luxury to sit back and say, oh, I've got a weekend off. You know, they're on call all the time. When you're volunteering, you know, I have the utmost respect, you know, like Mike said, you know, I so respect our emergency services and thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you do every day. And a lot of people don't take that, look at it in that way. You're just, you know, some people think, well, they're on call. And I think sometimes people think you are paid. But again, we sometimes have you jumping higher hurdles without the resources or the funding that actually have you, you know, get them in a timely fashion. But this doesn't go just across, doesn't just hit our emergency services. It's things across the board. And like Mike said, yeah, and Rob Plunkett said, sometimes things are come down from the federal government to us that we then have to try to struggle to somehow implement because it's been put on our shoulders. But once again, you know, we've got to look at the whole picture always. And I'm not saying that people don't try to, but we've got to be, you know, really looking very carefully at every bill that's passed, you know, knowing what is in there and what the impact is going to be. And again, and when I say this, I'm not trying to shift, you know, this discussion to our taxpayers, but our taxpayers, and I know people have busy lives and I get that and respect that, but you folks have to also, like many of you tonight, have talked about the issues that are hitting you home. Yes, you've got to get folks to vote. You've got to be looking at what these budgets are. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Call us up, you know, email us, text us. I'm always someone that I try to, though it doesn't always quite work, I try to call back or respond back within 24 hours because I do want to hear from my citizens. I do want to see what we can do, and we've got to all be in this together. But again, I would encourage folks to truly look at what these budgets are, this voting, this upcoming voting for town meetings. And, you know, look at what's there. Look at, you know, the struggles that you may already be having. You know, is it time, and I'm not saying yes or no here, but is it time for a budget to go down that has to go back to be reviewed again? And, you know, not saying there's easy answers in all of those, but again, we've got to look at what is working and what is not working. We can't just keep funding things that we really don't know. I know we've been doing some of that in our committee. I'm on the Institutions and Corrections Committee, and we've been looking at a number of things. Like we just had something today that we had, it was voted on, I think 2 years ago, and it was to extend a program that started out as a pilot program on something we were doing. And we pushed it to, you know, where we wanted other counties in the state to be on board as well to do the same thing. But we didn't do the full kind of review of how this would be done. And then when it was passed, it talked about a financial piece, but the monies never went into it. So everyone was kind of scratching their head like, why is no one using this program? Well, there was no money there to do, and we should have done the full review of the program, what was working, what was not. We've got to get back to some of the basics of really digging deep to look at, you know, what is working, what is not, what can be consolidated. And like someone said tonight, you know, we can't cut our way out of it. Well, but we can look at, like I said, the positives and the negatives to, try to put forth, fiscally, reviewed legislation that hopefully will help in our communities, but not, be another burden on the back of our taxpayers. But I'll cut there. I'm not sure if I quite answered the question, but I do understand where you're all coming from.
Thank you, Mary.
Jonathan? I think that the education piece we've talked about is really relevant to this. And I think the town really hit it out of the park, bringing our US Congresswoman, Dr. Brown, to town. Last year, was it, a visit to the Pownal Valley Fire Department to see what the impacts of these mandates can be on the ability of, what we see frequently across Vermont, nonprofits, maybe it's a quasi-municipal organization to keep up with federal regulations, meeting those mandates for uniforms, for equipment, for the size of cisterns, things, above ground, below ground, turnarounds, et cetera. For her to see what it looks like and what it would take to get to something that, oh, by the way, you're not eligible for as a 501c3 or as a non, public, you might say, entity. I think that education goes a long way for us to get a sense of where there's vulnerabilities that have unintentionally been built into the system, both in terms of, having to step up what each volunteer is entitled to and has to have. And if you're volunteering, here's your gear, a year later, you're having a baby, you can't keep volunteering, you can't reuse that stuff. It has to, you have to get something new, tailored to whoever else you can find. I think that, we're not in a position where we can be, we understand where those standards exist. Are those standards designed for rural Vermont? Are those standards designed for somewhere else, for a city or something with a massive tax base that it draws on? And that gap is one that having our federal delegation see with their own eyes really is miles ahead of what it's just sort of emails or something of that nature. Something that I feel some anxiety about is knowing that, home insurance companies, they know where our fire departments are. They know how far each one of us lives from one of them. And they hold it against us if it ever gets farther than what it currently is. Where every hydrant is, where every, station is, every house is, that's a real risk that we have as well. And I don't know what the impact to Pownal's, residents would be if you took two of those buildings off the map. And I'm not sure anyone in the insurance industry is going to tell us, but it's something that I think, we have, and I think a lot of Vermont, I think a lot of rural America has a risk that maybe is not currently known. And I don't know, I haven't found insurance companies to be too giving lately, because they're confronting their own risks that no one was planning on having to have the entire state of Louisiana prop up its own home insurance entity, state of Florida doing the same thing. I'm glad to live in a state that doesn't have a mile of ocean coastline right now. But it's still the case that, I thought Representative Magrum made a good point about how with rescue, it's caught in between two kinds of models. And that takes, I wish I had a better answer there, but it's one where in thinking of how, we're looking at emergency services, relying on that skill set, that upskilling that you need. So we know that the state has to really provide those credentials for emergency services that are available to people. You don't have to drive. Oh no, we have that training. It's in Brattleboro. We have it. If you come up to Rutland, I think really trying to lean on the sad, being aware of that, like looking at Brattleboro having Rescue Inc. all of a sudden be getting skepticism, in Brattleboro where they've been for 60 years in a hostile environment, one where all of a sudden it seemed like they're under microscope for reasons that were unclear to anybody else. And then there's moving contracts around. They have their own risks where it's like they have to do this every year. And this places people in a difficult position with morale. How can you feel like this is a career when you're just, one weird town meeting day away from looking at something that you can't plan for. I think, but like, there's still more for me to absorb on this topic, but it's one where I do think that, if we can identify, if we can make the risk big enough for the General Assembly, for all 180, as Mary's pointed out, for us to see, oh, we all have something big to lose here. We might have something meaningful, to do about it that's more than just commissioning a study. But I guess I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Baumgartz, we started with you on the first topic. We'll end with you on this one.
Well, going, like somebody said earlier, going last, it's all, everything's really been said. I'll just say that, as somebody who was involved in my rescue squad, when I was a younger person, and it was next to the fire department, and I knew what was going on then. And when I look back at that and how simple those days were compared to what's required of people who are volunteering their time now, I'm in awe that people do it. Because I look at, the fire departments around the state, and the effort being put in by the volunteers is just, it's truly mind-boggling. And I just, if nothing else, want to just add on by saying I have unbelievable respect, and I'll do anything I can to help make life easier. I don't know enough about which mandates are federal, which are state, and which ones are the real issues that we need to be talking about. But I'm, like everybody in the room, I think I'm very happy to have that discussion, should you want to do so. Because we need to know this, because I know how fragile the system is. And I know that there's not younger people come. It's harder to get younger people to come in. That scares all of you. I assume it scares me. And it's happening with both fire and rescue. And so I know I will say with some confidence that every legislator in this room really cares about this issue, and will do whatever we can to help. So you have to let us know what it is.
For sure. Do you have any board members? Brian? Sarah?
I was just wondering if it'd be okay to share all of your information with our fire departments and rescue squad so that they can reach out directly with their concerns.
Yeah, that was the question I had.
I have all of your emails.
Absolutely.
That would be fine. That would be fine.
Do I have anybody in the room that would care to comment? Anybody on Zoom that would care to comment, Hannah, on this? Okay. Perfect. So, I'm gonna take it upon myself to reach out to, our organizations here locally, and make sure that they reach out to each and every one of you. I know this is a concern of theirs, and I certainly appreciate and respect your answers. I didn't expect you to be able to differentiate between federal and state mandates, and I certainly understand that federal mandates are way beyond our control, right? And I think they do too. But if we can get some help with some of the state mandates that are going out there, or at least, and maybe not even some help, but maybe some awareness, and I'm not saying that there's not awareness out there, but if we can be heard down here in tiny Pownal, Vermont, in Bennington and where everybody else is, the other places that are being represented, I think that's a step forward. If nothing else, we're definitely not going backwards, and I don't think we're going sideways. Right? I don't like to go backwards. I'm not fond of going sideways. I like to go forward. I think this meeting tonight was incredibly helpful, and will be incredibly helpful for everyone. I appreciate everyone's efforts tonight. All the people who are sitting in the room, the people who are on Zoom. I wish we had a bunch more. That was our goal. I would like to continue these every once in a while. I think it's beneficial for everyone to hear what's going on. I think it's beneficial for the residents and taxpayers that we represent from our standpoint on the select board. But I also think it's very I think it's very helpful for our senators and representatives who are here in our area that live with us to hear concerns. I know we get off topic a little bit once in a while, but well, I think that's Vermont. I think Vermonters have a tendency to do that anyway. I just, I've been here a long time and I think.
And that is sometimes a good thing, that they can have a voice to say what they need to say.
Exactly. Right.
Well, and in the future too, hopefully we can catch up with you when you're not in session.
Right.
If we aren't catching you.
Yeah,
after
this was kind of a
50 hour
scheduling
day.
problem, right? Yeah, and I know that you guys have been busy today. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Unless you have something else that you would like to say as individuals, that we're here tonight with us.
I would just like to say thank you to everyone who's participated. And, you gave your time to be part of this discussion. And I certainly, like I said, am available should people want to call or that, but I would be open to other meetings as well. And like Mike said, or in the discussion that, we should do, or I think it was Jonathan. Well, Jonathan or Mike or both of you, in person is good as well. So whichever, I'll always try to accommodate. But thank you, all of you, so much.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments?
Yeah, I just want to echo Mary and say thank you, and thank you to the folks that actually spoke, because I know that oftentimes that can be very daunting and it's difficult to do. So I appreciate it when folks do, especially if it's in a public session. But certainly reach out to us, and our contact info is on the state website. So, and I think Tara has it. So if you need it, please reach out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I
everybody.
appreciate everything.
Thanks.
Have a
Thank you.
good evening, everyone. Stay
You too,
warm
Mary.
and safe.
Thank you,
And
everybody.
safe.
Do I have any
Bye-bye.
public comment? Hang out at the end of the meeting?
Yeah.
No, just a chat. Okay. Okay. Jim?
Jim's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Jim?
Jim Coast?
Jim?
Just a minute, I have to unmute everything.
That's okay.
First of all, I just want to thank you very much, Mike, and the rest of the select board, pulling this all together. It has been excellent. I just want to make sure that one resident that came from North Pownal, I give him 200% credit for showing up at this meeting tonight to stake his piece. And I hope that others would come on and just say what their opinions are. I just want to throw in there, I threw it on chat. I just want this, everyone to understand the H608. I don't think the posting of property needs to be placed on or made so restrictive for property owners. I think it needs to be to the point of you post your property, it's your property, you record it, that's it, until that property is sold. So I don't think it needs to be renewed every single year. The second thing is the inspection of vehicles. I have my insurance company charges me for insurance for non-insured people. I don't think I need to worry about non-insurance people, but if you take away the inspection of vehicles, it's going to put more vehicles out there that are not legal or not allowed or not even registered. And it puts me in a scary situation that I think it needs to be put down to the point of we need to put more legislature into making sure that when I'm traveling on the road, everyone out there is legal. And I just want to make one last concern. I just want to make sure that the representatives understand we have a bridge that is in disrepair. We have a landfill that is in disrepair. And I just want to make sure that everyone can kind of help out Pownal in any way it can so that the people of Pownal don't have to really absorb all these costs. Thank you very much. You guys all have a good night.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Any other hands up, Hannah? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Record.